This is Jamie Drummond for Good Food Revolution. We are joined today by two of the wonderful folks from Catena. We have Laura Catena, who is joining us all the way from San Francisco, and we have Marina Castillo, who is joining us from Vancouver. How are you both today?
We're very well. Thank you.
Amazing.
Now, we are here today to speak about a couple of your wines that have just joined our offering here in Ontario. We have, first up, we have this wine here. This is a new wine to our market, I believe. This is the Pasarisa Malbec Mendoza. Please tell us a little bit about this one, because I've never tasted this before.
Well, Pasarisa is a brand that we started about, a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, because we wanted to represent Malbec from regions outside of Mendoza. Mendoza is like our California, or like your Okanagan. It's where we make most of our wine.
Yes, yeah.
80% of it. But there's also other regions. We even have a place called La Rioja, just like the place in Spain, or we have Patagonia, we have Salta, where beautiful Malbec can be made. And it's very different from the Malbec from Mendoza, but it still has that kind of beautiful fruitiness and nice texture and smooth tannins, but it smells different, it tastes a little different. So Pasarisa is a brand that represents Malbec and other varieties from many different regions. You happen to have the one from Mendoza in Canada, but I'm hoping that in the future, we'll be able to also distribute in Canada some of the Malbecs from other regions. Yeah, but it's a beautiful wine. The idea is to be classic Malbec, not too much oak, but a little bit of oak to give it structure, but just like a really beautiful wine for food pairing.
I was looking, this comes in for some $16.95 in Ontario, but I was looking at some of the other markets, and it's normally quite a bit more expensive than that. And so I was thinking that $16.95 offers some incredible value. Was I right in saying this has never been offered in Ontario before, or was I mistaken?
Yes, it is right. Yes, we've never had Pasarisa Mendoza Malbec before.
And which other regions do you source the grapes for the other Pasarisa wines?
Yeah, so we have Pasarisa from Patagonia, and we have Pasarisa from La Rioja, Argentina. Those are, the one from Patagonia is a Malbec, the one from La Rioja is a Malbec, and we also have a Cabernet from Mendoza that's sold in other parts of the world, and then also from Salta, we have a Pasarisa. So it's really from many of the regions, and because we started planting vines in other regions outside Mendoza, not just because we wanted to experiment and explore, but also because there are water shortages in Mendoza. And so we felt that as a winery that wants to be around for another 200 years, a family winery, we've been making wine since 1902. The challenge I've given to our team is how do we make wine for another 120, 200 years? And so we are now exploring, actually, as of the last 10 years, we've been planting in other regions. And actually, even beyond that, my grandfather had vineyards in San Juan. We still have some of those vineyards, and in Salta. And he had traveled a lot through Argentina, and he loved some of the other regions. But many times the infrastructure was so poor in these other regions that, we didn't feel like we could make wine there because there was no electricity. Now that we have good infrastructure, we've had the time to explore the soils, the climate, and it really comes back to altitude, which is what's so special about Argentina, being right by the Andes, high altitude, intense sunlight, cool climate, poor soils, because these are alluvial soils, very stony, so you don't get high yields, you get low yields of very high quality fruit. Because of the cool climate at altitude, you get nice minerality, you don't get too much alcohol. So this is winemaking heaven, and Mendoza's winemaking heaven, but we think there's winemaking heaven also in La Rioja and Salta to the north and in Patagonia. And I think the world is really ready to taste wines from the other regions of Argentina because they are different. So, just like in Italy, you have, Barolo, and you have Tuscany, and you have Sicily, we have these different regions, except they're much more far apart. So we have about 2,000 miles from the northernmost vineyards to the southernmost vineyards. So it's really exciting. Pasarisa is a window into the new regions, but not so new, because in most of those regions, wine has been made since the 16th century. It's just that the wines have not been exported. So that's why I find it very exciting.
It's interesting if you're going to be bringing in these, hopefully bring in these the Pasarisa from the different regions. It will be quite fascinating to compare and contrast at that very accessible price point, because you don't usually have the opportunity to do that, because they're normally a little bit more expensive for region-specific wines that are similarly made. What kind of oaking treatment do you have on this particular one?
Yeah, so for this particular one, we use about 20% new oak.
Okay.
And then the rest is second use barrels or a little bit of stainless steel. We like to balance that, and some cement as well. So I don't know the exact composition, but it's probably about 30, 30, 30. The idea is, let's give a little bit of the vanilla, but just a touch, because we want the fruit to shine. And, cement is very popular around the world, and we've been using it now for 20 years, and we do like it. It makes wines that are very refreshing and have nice fruit and acidity, but then you got to add a little bit of oak also to give it that kind of texture on the mouth. So the combination is good. Yeah,
I've found myself more and more drawn to Argentinian wines that do use some of those, some of that concrete. It seems to bring about this kind of vibrancy and juiciness that I really like, and the more kind of medium, full-bodied wines, or maybe even medium at some points. Some of these wines that I kind of see as being the kind of new generation of Argentinian wines. They're definitely the ones that I'm drawn to right now. No, this is a lovely one, and you pack a lot into the bottle for $16.95 for sure. I think this will be a great success in Ontario.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, and
thank you
for saying concrete. I say cement, but actually concrete is a better word. Cement sounds like you're making it on the road. But
I wasn't correcting you there, Laura. It was just
no,
like in Spanish.
No, like we say cemento in Spanish,
Cemento.
but concreto also. Yeah, concrete is the right word. Yes.
And next up, we have something else that I just tasted for the first time 2 nights ago in this vintage. This is and excuse my pronunciation here, Paraje. How does one pronounce this word here?
Paraje.
Oh, it wasn't too bad.
That was very good.
Altamira Malbecs. This is the 2018. Tell us a little bit about the appellation, why you make this specific appellation wine.
Yeah. So, we have often made wines from a blend of altitude. And this is something that you can only do in Argentina, what I call a high altitude blend, because you can make a Malbec that has some grapes from 3,000 feet elevation, some grapes from 4,000, some grapes from 5,000, and you get the kind of ripeness and texture from the lower altitude, a little more of the alcohol. Then the mid palate often comes from that middle altitude, clay soils we often have because there were lagoons there, millions of years ago. And then from the high altitude, you get more minerality because the natural acidity is higher, and you get more concentration because the yields are lower and because of the cool climate. So you put all this together and you have what I call Chanel number 5, which is a blend of beautiful aromas, which every year changes. And our change is not from the perfumer, it's from the climate. So the climate changes and the blend's different. And I think that this concept in these wines that are high altitude blends are just amazing, because you don't have that in other parts of the world. When you want to create texture and complexity, for example, Bordeaux, you mix varieties. You mix Merlot with Cabernet Franc, with Cabernet Sauvignon. In Argentina, we can mix different components of the same variety, which is planted very close to each other. See, in France, if you needed to go from what we have at 3,000 feet to 5,000 feet, you'd have to drive for 7 hours. In Argentina, we have it very close to each other because the altitude goes up very quickly. So this is the gift of our mountain climate. Now, what I kept on finding was that people didn't really know how different some of these regions were. And, they thought that we didn't have what the French call terroir, which is a taste of place, because they were drinking some of these blends. So we actually came out with this line of wines called the Catena appellation, wines. And each one of the wines comes from only one region. So we make a wine like Catena, the classic, which is a blend of altitude. And then we also have these wines labeled Catena Appellation. We have Catena Appellation Agrelo, we have a Catena Appellation San Carlos, Tupungato, and this is the Paraje Altamira. And Paraje Altamira actually has kind of a roller coaster story because there was a producer who was trying to own the name of the appellation. This would be like somebody in Okanagan saying, I trademarked Okanagan, so I'm the only one that can put Okanagan on my label. And imagine what would happen. There would be protests, you know. And that was what was happening in Argentina. We were saying, hey, you trademarked it before there was a trademark law, because the trademark of appellations law in Argentina dates back to 1999. It's very recent.
Yes, yeah.
Before that, people could just grab the name of a place. You know, they could grab Napa and put it on their label, like the equivalent.
Yeah, the equivalent.
So, yeah, exactly. So we basically got together with the local producers and we went to the Institute and we said, guys, you know, this can't happen. We all have vineyards here. And so what ended up happening is that the producer that owned Altamira kept Altamira, and then the Paraje Altamira became the name. And Paraje means like a small spot. It's kind of like a village concept.
Yeah,
a paraje would be like a little village. And so Paraje is like a little stop, a little tiny village. And so Paraje Altamira is kind of like saying the Altamira village. And so actually there was a journalist, Patricio Tapia, who you might know, who called these the village wines of Mendoza. And I like that concept because each one of these little villages has its particular culture and the soils and climate are distinctive.
What is particular to this particular appellation wine?
Yeah, so Altamira is one of my favorite appellations because it has a lot of stones, and the stones are covered in calcium carbonate, and there's also some crumbled limestone in between. And these soils are very well drained, so you have no diseases. Like you can farm organically here very easily, very well drained soils. And what's very beautiful is that when you're planting a vineyard, you have to pull out some really big stones because otherwise the roots can't really go through a gigantic stone. And because it's so expensive to take these stones and put them somewhere, you usually put them on the side and use these big stones instead of a wall. So we don't have those little brick walls like they have in, or, you know, those stone walls that they have in Germany or in France. We have these gigantic white stones that line the vineyards, and they're so beautiful. And that's what really characterizes Paraje Altamira. And these are basically alluvial stones that, you know, rolled down as the glaciers were melting, because this was all covered by glaciers. And they are part of the terroir because of the drainage. And I think the wines of Altamira are very distinctive because also the soils are generally shallow. So yields are low, high concentration. But what I find the most typical is the violet aromas and the velvety tannins.
Now, this is something that I wanted to ask you about.